5 seconds before it. Oh, I'm talking when you should be talking. Over to Hailey.
It's okay. Hi, everybody. So I'm here with Mr. Ben Vasterlin. It's been a while since we've done a video on typology, MBTI, all that good stuff. And as a lot of you know, or probably don't know, YouTube has not been very fair with me in that they've deleted some of my content, and they can't even give me reasons why. Not going to get into that, but as far as I'm concerned, they can suck a giant, you know what. So I'm pretty much going to post whatever I want because it's my channel, and I can't post physique stuff anymore anyway. So here we go. But anyway, yeah, I'm here with Mr. Ben Vasterlin. He is like he just knows his shit when it comes. I'm sorry, I'm going to try not to cuss. He knows his stuff when it comes to all this. It blows me away. He is very competent. And Ben, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Oh, thank you. Now we have to live up to that. I tried to be I tried to be the Jungian equivalent of Jonathan on my channel, who knows a heck of a lot about Enneagram. But like, so for instance, he's been on a lot of courses and that lot. And but I haven't been on courses, but I think I've read the right books in the right way, and some of the books need a lot of careful analysis, and in order to properly understand. I've got a little bit of an advantage in that because my MBTI preferences are INTP, and a lot of the people who've written these systems are INTPs, or INTP resemblers, as I call it. And I suppose that's the first point there. It's like a lot of people, there can be an all or nothing approach to typology, in that somebody can like totally embrace it and believe that they are a type, and I don't believe that's healthy. And then there's the other reaction, if you sort of sell it like that, is you get those people who it's like, hey, I can't be put in a box, and they don't want, and they don't want to be a type. But if you then say, oh, this is a system of profiles, and then it's about degrees of resemblance, then you can sort of say, I think Donald Trump resembles an ESTP more than an INFP. How can you disprove that?
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you were to say such and such is an INFP or is an ESTP, then you can have a big argument about that, about whether someone is or is not a type. And especially, I mean, you've got some science background like myself. Like, it's like, because then you're sort of saying that somebody is a category. Well, it's just that someone's not a category, but they can sort of like have certain features that means they should be in this category more than other ones. And you can talk about degrees of resemblance. So with myself, I most resemble INTP and secondarily resemble INFP. And at times when I'm on my territory, or which is many INTP resemblers or people with INTP preferences, if they're talking about what they're interested in and excited about what they're interested in, they're going to be more expressive. And some people might think, oh, I think you're an ENTP, or I think you're an ENFP, just because it's situational extroverting. And that's something else. And digressing onto my model, where I really take the Jungian idea of introversion and extroversion and really go with that, with how you define the functions. Okay. But I'd like to say first that it's really best to think about it as a verb. And so I've changed some of the terminology to really sort of like hammer that home. And so instead of saying extroverted thinking, I will say extroverting thinking. Because if you say extroverted thinking, I will say, when was it extroverted? It's past tense. When was it extroverted? It's a process.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I have to interject really quick and say that before we get off topic, Ben and I were supposed to cover one specific model today, but then we got into talking about just general things. And so we're like, why don't we make this a general I just grill Ben on, ask him questions on all variety of stuff, socionics, MBTI, whatever. And so that's probably the direction we're going to take. And so with that being said, I'd like to jump back into what you just said and ask you, so what about when somebody, like, if you left them on their own 80-90% of the time, like someone like me, for example, who's at home all the time, I'm just left to my own devices. Instead of saying she is in the process of introverting, would it be fair to say this person, if left on their own and when left on their own so much of the time, resembles this type so much that we can say this is a very heavy introverted type rather than she introverts most of the time? Like when can we turn it into this is a introverted resembler period, or this is an extroverted resembler period?
Well, I actually wrote a little bit of this. I'm trying to find the my graphics. Well, I wrote a lot of this into the description of the model.
I was reading some of that. I thought that was really good, really interesting.
I'm just gonna. I think I stuck it all on this one. Yeah, I'll use this.
Yeah, if you want to pull it up, I'll share it.
Thank you.
If you can find it.
There we go. Yes, that's always a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, here we go.
So.
Yep.
So, again, yeah. The way Jung described it, yeah, really going with when Jung wrote about objective. Now, the problem is with the word objective is, and I'll give you what I think it means, the three meanings that are out there, and you might have a fourth. So if we look up the word objective, we usually get someone who's being impartial, or someone who's going towards the data, the empirical, and that's the one that I prefer to use. But then there's a third one, where sometimes in philosophy, they'll say that something is objective when it's like really, really, really true. So it's like formal logic and stuff that cannot ever be not that way in any circumstance. And you never need to observe it. 2 add 2 is always 4, or something like A plus B equals C, and then the relations between them, those kind of like structural things. And okay. I think a lot of people, and this is where I differ from socionics, where socionics will confuse logic with TI, but TI is just introverting thinking. And what tends to happen is, and TI is going to be different in ISTP than it is in INTP. When TI is in INTP, now if I'm actually naming the actual type pattern, I actually prefer to sort of use. I've sort of come up with my own naming system, but it's very much using the Kersey names. So what I mean by that is, so in Kersey, they would say, I will get back on track. They would say like that I would be the type. They would say the architect rational, and rational being the temperament. Now I used to want to do it like genus species, and sort of like do the temperament first, and then the smaller one second. But then that would mean something like rational collaborator. And then it was like, what? So there's an irrational collaborator? So it's like, yeah. So but that first part where it says architect, that's the role, that's a predisposition. So for example, a lot of people with INTP preferences or INTP resemblers, or I might even call them TINX resemblers, they have a predisposition towards designing stuff, designing their own theories, such as Model V. And I would argue that you might get a lot of people with INTP preferences who write science fiction. And it's like, come on, we're designing designing a world, and what are the rules within that world to get it to sort of work?
So I have a question. Why does socionics tend to define TI as just like your own logic? Like, why?
Well, they sort of just do it as, not so much, they don't they don't just do it as your own logic. They just define it as logic. And to me,
as opposed to like objective truth and empirical data.
The problem is with socionics is it doesn't understand. I host Victor Galenko on my channel. There is so many good ideas in socionics, the intertype relations, the romance styles, having a good 8-function model of like the weakest function, like so socionics can explain why you suck at FE and things like that. And how
that's one of the main things that really concreted me in, if that's a word, to my type.
And sort of and have a very good prediction about which types you get on well with and those that you don't. And like, so that works really well. But there's certain things where, so one of the problems with socionics is it has this sort of asinine dichotomy called external, internal. And it might just be one certain person who, the way he talks about it, because should I share the screen of what this person said? Because I think I might. I think I'll be a little bit naughty. Because he made it a public. He made it a public comment. He made it a public comment. So I want to put on screen.
That's fair.
Because this person, this socionics person called Jack, he will say that thinking and sensing are external and don't need reinterpretation. I'm like, what? What is, Jack, have you ever heard of semiotics or language or linguistics? We have to reinterpret everything. If I say the word empathy, your understanding of the word empathy is going to be slightly different from mine. So that difference we could categorize as the subjective factor. But the bit that we share, the bit that sort of everyone shares in their understanding of empathy, you could sort of say that's like the empirical part. I mean, it's not as different as, say, if it was totally subjective, then our understanding of the word empathy would be as different as banana and truck. But, we have enough that we can understand each other well enough. So that we could say that's the empirical part of language, the empirical part of just thinking. Just in this description here, that people can have a vague idea of what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But also they're not going to understand it exactly the same way. And other people are going to look at this and see things that I don't see. And so Carl Jung got it right, where as part of his system, he said that, okay, 4 of these functions are, now he meant empirical though. So I'm going to change it to what he actually meant. He meant, so that's what I mean. There's an example. He said objective, but he meant empirical. So it's like getting it. You see what I mean? There's the difference between what you say and what you mean. And like, that's one of the things that you would do. Like you once said to me that whenever you come across a new word, you work out its meaning based on the context in which it's used. And so there's going to be part of that. And so to me, what my model does is it emphasizes what extroverting and introverting is, and the fact that it's a preference for it, and it's like it's what you do by default and what you do situationally. So an extrovert will not an extrovert. An introvert will situationally extrovert. So here,
draining.
Yeah, here we go. Here we go. Yes, Vanderhoek. This example. That one there. He took up horse riding again after a long interval. He described his type as, and he did it in such an INTP way, an introvert and thinking type with subsidiary intuition. that was his nice, snappy naming system. Anyway, so getting back to the Kersey one, like, so in Personology, which was Kersey's final book before he died in 2013. He was born in 1921. The book came out in 2010. He would describe, say, the INTP as, he'd sort of put it as something like the strategic accommodator.
Okay.
And so for a long time, I would sort of use that, but then I thought, oh, hang on a minute. You're confusing the intellect that the rational is usually best at. So rationals are usually best at strategic building. So you're confusing the intellect with the type. The actual type is when you're talking about the temperament. So it's like, so you would say, so I would be in the Kersey system, I am like an accommodator rational. And this is, and so an accommodator is informing and reserved. You are directive and reserved. So you would be a contender rational.
Okay.
And so I suppose with interaction style, you can definitely, you can look at things and you can classify people. So if you've got someone who's expressive and they're directive and it's like they're an initiator, they're in charge, and it's like the stuff you can point to and say, I am classifying that person as in charge, as an initiator. Getting towards the temperament can sometimes be harder, but other times it can be so easy. Like if you're watching a cop show and the cop is somebody who does things their own way and doesn't like being by the book, and they because I recently watched the first episode of Man and Machine, and he's saying, he says to he's got a gynoid partner, and he says to her, this doesn't look like a real house. And he said he wanted it to be all messy to make it look real, to make it look like a human's house, like his temperament. And it's like, okay, his temperament is artisan. There is like no way about it. And because you can point at somebody and say, okay, Hailey here, she is doing things her own way. She is not going towards the authority. She doesn't give a monkey's what the NASM says. The NASM is wrong. You're going to think for yourself. And it's like, not only is that something very visible, it's also extremely important, rather than having a dichotomy that hardly matters, such as like, there's other systems out there, like one called cognitive type, where it looks at people's facial expressions, and it's like, yeah, so it's like not be relevant. I mean, it might not be causally linked to the type. It's not. I mean, there are certain patterns out there, like an ESFJ resembler tends to be more facially expressive than an INTJ resembler. And what I noticed with Hailey, I used to folks sort of like, Hailey's smile, blink and you miss it. That's INTJ is like back to the default state. And then with ESFJ, if they're not smiling, it's like, whoa, what have you done wrong?
Yeah, it's so funny how situational this can be. Around certain holidays when we visit family, of course, it's the most social I've been in months. And so I'm around family, laughing, joking for 1, 2, 3+ hours, and I'm smiling the whole time. And oh my gosh, Ben, my cheeks just hurt. It hurts to smile because I never do it. Like I smile 3 times a day, and then immediately it's gone. And just it's so funny.
I used to use the excuse genuinely. Look, I've got a lot of fresh hair. It's hard to shape my teeth.
So really quick, probably not really quick, it's going to divulge into a totally different topic, but before we hopped on live, we were talking about something and I was like, wait, we should be filming, like recording this. And that was in the video that I had watched. You were like, oh, the INTP fish doesn't know what's wet with an eye. And so can you elaborate a little more on that, please?
Right. Okay. So like, okay, she's put me on the spot here. The hardest function.
What? Grilling Ben time.
Yes. So NI is that function that's really hard to explain, and so best thing we can do is sort of, and I always like to define functions so that they sort of correlate to the Kersey roles. So, for example, the way, and I would say NI can be used in isolation, but it's really hard to see in isolation because it's so internal. But when it's used with either TE or FE, you can sort of see it more. So, for example, when Hailey uses NI, you're using it with extroverting thinking. And so you are now, what Kersey would say is that in the role that you are predisposed to, but you don't necessarily do, but you are predisposed towards thinking ahead, thinking far ahead, and thinking strategically about, and then it becomes about, and then I suppose the NI becomes visible in terms of thinking about which steps and in which order do I need to take to achieve this long-term objective. And Kersey would say that that role is the arranger of contingencies, and that would be, and that role would be the strategic arranger. That's why I didn't want to call it, say, strategic contender, but that would be the strategic, because it's strategic building. And there's two kinds of strategic building: coordinating and constructing. But the coordinating part, and I would say with NI, so socionics calls it intuition of time. I once called it intuition of change, but I said that in an event and Victor misunderstood me, because change could just mean over here, over here, over here, you know, like any kind of change. Where it's just like Ben, you're changing topic all the while. But what I actually meant, and there's the example, thinking is not external, like, but what I meant was development. I meant change in terms of development. So if we
hard with the whole language barrier thing, and Victor needs a translator, so that's
yeah. Like one time I said that I give the thing about, I did the metaphor of Douglas Adams watching the judo match, and he said use your opponent's weight against him, and then weight got translated into weight as in time, and it's like, oh no, he thought I was talking about NI, and it's like because of the weight thing. Anyhow, but development. So NI, a theme of NI is development. So the NFJs, they think that they can develop people, especially the bad boy STPs, into the ideal man. And they have that, so they think they can develop people. NTJs, and a lot of times they can develop people because NFJs, and then it's like, then you look at the roles. Teacher, and that's expressive, and you are developing a group of people. If you're a counselor, you're developing one person at a time. And that's where the intuition of development, the intuiting is like paired with, and it's expressive, and you can see it. If you watch carefully and observe, say, a counseling session, it's like you can, and if you were to talk to the counselor afterwards, you might say, well, I can sort of see that if I sort of push them in this direction, and it's like the kind of, and they have an intuition of which direction to go in with a person. And then if you were to talk to the NTJs, it's like they would go, well, and it's like they would talk about, again, thinking about the future and the plans. It might be a 5 to 10 year business plan of how things are going to be, how things are going to develop. And so I think development is a theme of NI. Now, there's also a little bit of TI in that the functions are arranged as opposites. And if we look at guardians, they wish to stabilize. And so we can say development is the opposite of stabilizing. And so the guardians wish to do things the same old way.
Right.
NIs want to do things differently. They see how things are going to change. So a theme of NI is development. So that's when it's in use, it becomes about development, developing objects or developing people.
So how does the INTP not know it's what with an I?
I will get back to that. Now, what I think, so when we get back to the thinking about how things are going to arrange them towards a long-term objective, well, I think that's TI. Because but what I've come to realize is that I think the NI is what is leading me to think in a certain direction. Is I might have the intuition might then be, there's something to this. Mm-hmm. I need to think more in this direction. Whereas ISTP doesn't do that as much because NI isn't as strong in them. And I think that's what it is. It's like you might have had that as well, where you might be in that state more often, where it's you have do you have a feeling sometimes that that your thinking should go in a certain direction?
Yeah.
So I think that's what it is. I think, but it's not conscious. But whenever it then appears in my mind, well, that's thinking. So I think that anything that's related to NI, I usually think that that's TI. But I have to reflect on certain situations where it's like, oh, there's something to this. If I could just go in this direction, I'll define it properly. But it's not yet, like articulated in my mind in words. It's sort of that's. I think that might be an example of introverted intuiting, and then also.
There was something you said now that you don't articulate it in your mind with words, and that's something that we were just talking about the other day, that I find that so often in my life, if not predominantly, when I'm thinking about something, I'm not actually articulating it in words. Like there's no words passing through my mind. I'm thinking about the concept. I'm just thinking about it without the need of words. And it's interesting because I found that as I've gotten older, and especially as I've had to use social media more and actually talk to people more, this is the most I've ever talked to people. Granted, it's online and I'm typing everything, but still, I find myself more and more actually thinking with words now. And that's something that just...
I've learned something. I never... Because to me, it's like, you think with words.
Is that like... Is that normal?
Yeah, that might help to explain why INTJs can have problems with self-expression. If like most of the time they're not even using words.
Yeah, see, and that's the problem. That's been a major problem with me throughout my life, and also Sebastian. I mean, like right now, I understand it. I understand it already in my mind. I can see the understanding, but I cannot find the words to convey the understanding to others. And it leads to a very choppy, awkward oral display. It's just terrible.
Right.
But I've gotten better as I've gotten older, and I found that the more that I practice it and more that I talk to people and I'm forced to articulate it, it gets better. But this is not something that's come naturally to me.
Right. So that I think that's going to be another example of like, so in the MBTI, when you take the MBTI, I think when you took the step 1, I think you got 100% J. Is that right?
I think so. I think that's right.
But but your actual internal state would be irrational.
Yeah.
I would say that you thinking about stuff without using words, we could say that is irrational.
But it doesn't feel messy. It feels natural. Like it feels right.
But one of the things with tests though is that, and what I would say that one of the problems that Socionics has is that it won't swallow its pride when it comes to JP. And I would say to them, try to come up with some JP questions where Hailey here would score as a perceiver.
Okay.
Because you would have to write very complex questions to try to get at your internal mental process. Like those kind of things like there, where you say the way you think about things without words. And it's like, and you'd have to design your JP questions to get around your strong TE that's very organized to get towards your lead function. And it's like, I think that would be very hard. And even if you could come up with those questions, I don't think they would suit other people. you'd almost have to have different set of questions for introverts and extroverts, or rather, people with a predisposition towards introverting and extroverting. I could put some meat on the bones in because this might confuse people where you've got like okay, no, I should, so I can also go through things in order, folks. So it's like, so we talk here about, so the idea here, so Model G would have it that, and it actually took me a long time to understand Model G, what it meant by internalities and externalities. And one of the pieces of thinking in Model G was that an introvert contributes to society through their introverted functions, and they only use their extroverted functions at close range. And I was like, okay, I can see sometimes when that's the case, but it's like, well, it's not really the case. It's like I'm a little bit more fluid than that, because it might be, well, but it's like, well, the INTJ usually contributes to what, I mean, they usually earn a living, and it's usually involving TE. They're using the TE to do that, and a lot of people are using TE, and so I sort of changed it from social mission, from a societal row and a personal row, to default versus situational. So it might be, for example, that you might have somebody who is, say, a thespian, but they're an introvert, and so situationally they're extroverting for a living. Or you might have, say, an introverted person, someone who's naturally introverted. So a college professor who's naturally introverted, or naturally, as a predisposition towards introverting, they go up and they deliver a lecture. Well, they're getting paid to go out and deliver that lecture to extroverts. That's an extroverting role. Or you might have an INTP radio host.
Okay. Yeah.
On a sort of like an academic.
I have to ask, have you? Oh, go ahead.
No, you have to ask.
Well, I was just going to. Yes, just because of what I personally experienced, in that when I have to situationally extrovert, it's very, very draining, and I cannot imagine choosing a career. Of course, N equals 1 means nothing, right? I'm sure there are other introverting individuals who maybe love extroverting so much as their field of choice, and like they choose that as their field of choice. But I mean, I would imagine that most introverts, if they truly have a crazy introverting bent, that extroverting for a career would be very draining. Like, how can you wake up and think, oh yes, I can't wait to go and extrovert today?
Well, INTJs like to extrovert their thinking when it, like, in terms of, but again, there's 4 different kinds of extroverting.
Okay, that's fair.
Right, because
that's fair.
If the INTJ is thinking about arranging their steps to achieve that long-term objective, you're extroverting your thinking. It's like, what is plausible? What resources do I need? And it's not like theoretical or like INTP land kind of thing. Like you really are using NI with TE.
See, and that's fair, and that's where I need to understand there's more than one. It's not just dealing with people, which is what I'm defining it as. Like extroverting, you're having to deal with people. So it's not just that. Yeah,
and also you've said that I don't know if I should say what you've done when you were driving a car, and sometimes about where your attention lies or doesn't lie.
Right. Yeah. It's so true. It's true. It's very scary, and I've almost gotten into very bad crashes because of that, because I'm just lost in my mind, and then 10 minutes later down the road on the freeway, I don't even remember passing. Like, I don't even remember the last 10 miles. It's like I go on autopilot and I'm driving, and that's dangerous.
There's an example of a situation where you definitely situationally should be extroverting your sensing, your instinct, but you're by default you're going internally. You're going towards internal matters. So we can sort of go through this because it's like we can sort of get through this idea of maybe you want to read it out, and then I don't know how best you process information. You might want to read it out, then stop and quiz me.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. Compared to the personal row in Victor Glenco's model G, the situational row is less specific. It can include the personal EG. You don't by chance happen to have this here so like we can see what we're reading about, or like when we're done we can hop over to it and see?
Yeah, I could send you this, yeah.
Because I mean, as someone who is not very versed on this as it is, if we have people watching this, they're probably not going to understand what we're talking about. But okay, let me it can include the personal EG, the TINX resembler becoming expressive when talking on its own territory. See, I feel like I'm the same way, especially if I'm talking about something I love. I can be very expressive, but past that, I kind of don't care, and I'll just kind of shut myself out. Not because I'm trying to be rude, it's just...
Yeah, and that's where temperament matters. So, for example, if we would compare ourselves to, say, ISFJ, or you might be related to someone with, say, ISTJ preferences, the kind of things that those people are interested in, like other people are interested in. I mean, if like 90% of people were rationals, first of all, it would be the Jetsons and everything would be advanced. Like high technology and robots doing most of the work, but there's more to talk about because of like opportunity. But for NTs, it's like they hear like a concrete discussion, and it's like they're like this. It's like, don't you people ever discuss an idea?
Yeah, but it's kind of limiting. Like, okay, the whole like you need to extrovert and use FE. It's good for business and, you know, that kind of talk. But then when you're like, okay, let me extrovert today, let me deal with people today. And then you get there and you're like, oh man, I'm like an inch wide and a mile deep. And then past that, I hate small talk. It's like, this is why, like for me personally, I have to talk to people about stuff I don't care about, stuff I don't want to talk about. And it's so draining for me to have to put on a face and smile. And I'm just, I don't want to do it. It's very draining.
Yeah, I remember you once saying that about a certain typologist. And you said, oh, I recognize he put on a face there. A certain typologist with INTJ preferences. I'll just do a private joke for Hailey. That guy.
Is it still very much like that?
I don't know. Of late, he had a ponytail.
Oh, interesting.
Right. Right. So more expresses on its territory, e.g. about an interest, or more open with feelings when talking to someone it has a good relationship with. However, situational includes something the personal does not. The idea that certain situations draw on certain faculties, feeling cognitive functions, which are of opposite vertness to the type, e.g. situations which draw on the extroverting functions of the introvert, such as when you are driving, you should be extroverting your attention. And then here, Vanderhoop, when he is riding a horse and he's learning, probably not, say if you've not ridden a horse for 5 to 10 years and you're learning again, it's like, what's this? My attention was riveted on the totality of my sense experience and my reactions to it. So,
aren't the INTP just generally, they're not very keen to want to engage in SE activities?
No, they hate SE activities.
So, I mean, he must have really wanted to learn to, you know.
Oh, well, that's something else. That's something else we should think about in terms of, it's like, what's the upbringing of the person like?
Okay, fair. Right.
Like, so there's an INTP female, I won't mention her name, but like she grew up in the countryside, and so she did a lot of extroverting things in the countryside. But you could almost say that that's like, there's like an SI aspect to that in terms of like if you're outside and it's pleasant and it's relaxing, rather than it's almost like a difference between someone who is relaxing on a nice pleasant day versus someone who's like actually competing and interacting and challenging the environment.
Well, I mean, at this rate, just doing anything, physically enacting anything, whether it be picking flowers, could be considered extroverting. Like, where's the line drawn? Where is it like, oh, horse riding, that's so extroverting, but picking flowers, no. Or, you know,
well, it's a balance. I mean, it's like if you are picking flowers, but you're thinking about something else, and
well,
you're
what
doing
if
like,
I'm riding a horse thinking about something else? Like I've
well,
done it.
you are doing both. You are that shows your heavy preference for introverting. That when you're doing something where you should be in an extroverting state, you're still in that introverting state.
Okay.
So it's like, yeah, I mean, it's like heavy, and that's fascinating to me that you think about things without using words.
Is it? I mean, do you not do this? Is this not? I mean,
No, it's not. It's all words. It's mainly words with me. Yeah. If I even talk to myself.
Okay. I talk to myself too, but out loud.
Yeah.
And as of the last year, especially, I found myself, and this is why I thought, wow, I'm actually thinking to myself in words, like thinking, actually the sentence, wow, that person, da da da, in a sentence. And I thought, holy cow, what's wrong with me? And so the only thing I can assume is that because I've been forced to actually engage with words with people more and more, that
and it might be a little different in my case because like I've like written a play and a preference for writing, and so that's like a focus of attention.
You know what?
For me,
I don't even think that's the case because when I was younger, especially, I read a lot. So I mean, I'm engaging with physical words. Like I read a lot, but still, I mean,
what about writing though?
Pardon me?
What about writing?
Yes, not as much as reading. That writing came later, but I've done a fair amount of writing. But with that being said, I really don't know if it's because I've been forced to actually engage with people more than I ever have, and so I don't know where this is coming from, or it's just me getting older, getting more developed in certain areas that I'm not. But I assume that to an extent, everybody just had times where they would think about things and it would just be like they're envisioning a world in their mind where things are happening and they don't utter a word to themselves in their mind. They just see something like materialize and they just see it in their mind. Like, I don't know how to describe it.
That's probably, there might be a similarity there with like NI DOMs and SI DOMs in that. And that's one of these things that like Victor has his own temperament system, but I call it mindset because I don't want to confuse it with Kersey temperaments. But that internal state stuff is extremely hard to get at. I did not know that about you, and I've known you since 2016. So you can see, like, for typing somebody, unless you sort of like, and like, you know what I mean? It's like difficult to get at that because it's so internal.
Well, I guess I assume that to an extent everybody did this naturally. So I didn't think I was different in that regard. Like, I don't know. I guess it's since I started talking with Sebastian about it, and because we were talking about thinking about a concept and not thinking about saying the words. And then I just caught myself thinking like, wow, in the last year or so, I'm actually thinking out in sentences and that's just not like me. And so talking with you and you're like, that's weird. And I don't know, I guess I just never thought to say it to you because I figured that everybody experienced it.
So with me, because I am thinking in the words, it then makes it easier for me to then talk about it.
Maybe so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's part of the problem with me and maybe others who experience this, because definitely when it's like I understand a concept, not in words. I kind of understand it as if I'm like, I see it in my mind, like working, like imagine you see an engine and all the parts, like you see it in your mind, it's working, but you don't need the words to explain it in your mind because you see it, you understand it. But you can't just connect your mind to someone else and say, here, understand it like I do. You have to speak words, and it's just, this is something I'm very poor at.
Yeah, and then you're an example there of this idea that thinking is external because it doesn't need to be reinterpreted. And you just said there, it's very hard to communicate that. So that's an asinine dichotomy where, so they would say, so socionics would say, classical socionics would say, thinking and sensing is external and intuiting and feeling is internal. And I'm like, and that's why they don't have this, the empirical subjective part. And it's like, well, if you don't have that, you don't understand functions properly, because every function has an empirical part and a subjective part. So for example, if someone's really upset, like nearly everyone can see the empirical part of this person is empirically upset. They are giving the signals out of being upset, but they don't know exactly what that person's experience is like and what it's like to be upset. So there's an empirical part and a subjective part. Or with sensing, you and Sebastian might look at something and your experience of it might be slightly like, you might hear a piece of music and you're like, oh, I like that, and he might hate it. Or like, and again, and then there's other things that you agree on. So it's like there's an empirical part, but you can like see the same thing differently.
Right.
So that's and then with done feeling.
So hold on, let's go back to the bit about the INTP doesn't know they're wet with NI. So it's that they can develop it and use it, but they don't quite, like they wouldn't.
I think it goes so quick into thinking. I think it goes so quick into thought, so quick into words that.
But how would you define an INTP? Like valuing NI, not valuing NI, like being good at it, being able to develop it? Like, give me the lowdown.
It's like, yeah, where you said you're thinking about something without the words, and you like got these images and things. Now the benefit of that is then you can then think about things that have not yet been expressed in words, and you can think about things that there's not a word for yet. I think that might explain why INTPs are like coming up with their own words. They'll think about something, they want to put it in words, and they'll come up with a new word for the thing that they're thinking about. I think so. The way I experience NI, so okay, I've got something for you. Van der Hoop's 6 features of intuition, and it has some NI things in it. So Van der Hoop folder, conscious orientation. So Van der Hoop is, I say it's Carl Jung 2.0. It's better than psychological types. So here we go. Book scans and screen grabs. Intuition. Okay, is that going to be okay? 6 features of intuition. So part of it is going to be. Oh, I clicked the wrong thing. That's the video share button. It's this one I want. Right, so here we go.
Okay, got it. Good. Okay, let's see. You want me to read it?
Yeah, go on then.
This kind of conscious experience is something special. In addition to the instinctive spirit, pardon the kids screaming. I hope no one can hear that. There's like a school right down here.
Yeah, because I was thinking, blimey, there's something you haven't told me when you said the kids.
Yeah, lots of screams usually. In addition to the instinctive sphere of experience, it possesses the following distinguishing characteristics. A, compared with the continuity.
Oh, I'll just say one thing. Van der Hoop looked at Carl Jung's definition of sensing, and he looked at sensing types, and he said, there's more going on here than sensing. And being a good INTP, he said, right, I'm changing he renamed it. I'm calling it instinct. That's not sensing, that's instinct. Because it's like, if you eat something, you have an emotional reaction to what you're eating. And it's like, oh, that's nice. It's like the emotional reaction to the sense is automatic. It's bound up with whatever you're sensing. And then, say with an artisan, when they experience something, there might be a sort of an urge to then do something. And then if you then ask them afterwards, why did you smash it up? Oh, I felt like it. Boom, I felt like that as well. It's like, or with the guardian, say your sister, there's like an instinct to habit. And so I call it seek, sensing, emotion, action, and a certain kind of knowing is all bound up together. And and he called it instinct. I call it instincting, because Dario and Linda Berens changed intuition to intuiting, so that all the ings are there. And so I'm going to call it instincting.
So more of the verbiage.
More of the verbiage. The cognitive processes.
Okay. Okay, let's see. You know what? I'm just going to read these through in my mind really quick. Okay.
Will there be words? In your mind?
It's interesting because when I read, like, I don't see the word in my mind. It just, it manifests as what it is with that. Like, no, I don't
hear it. Do you hear it? Do you sub-vocalize?
No.
Wow. Every time I read, I hear it.
No, I don't.
And in fact, if I have to hear it, otherwise I just completely lose track.
Interesting. That's really interesting. You know, a good example, remember when I was drawing my big ass cell and I abandoned it? So when I'm thinking about different pathways in the cell, I'm not thinking in my mind like, oh, like the sentence this enacts this downstream. Like, no, it's like I just see the events in the cell. Like I just assumed everybody does this.
There's certain kinds of thinking, like for instance, say with a certain camera move, if it's like a very visual thing.
Okay.
Then then there's an example of thinking without words, or like when I was doing the staging in the play, and it's like, oh, like then I'm thinking without words, but I might have a commentary on that, an internal dialogue.
Okay. Yeah. See, I feel like this internal commentary is what is coming about more and more in me over the last few years. And I haven't really noticed that like when I was younger. Okay. Let me read through this.
So I have those moments of inspiration. Like when I'm writing something, like a joke will pop into my mind, like, or the line from the character, and the characters are like, and the best ones, it's like it's coming out fully formed. The line is popping into my consciousness from the point of view of the character, and the key is to, once you have the character and the point of view of the character, then the character says funny things.
Okay, yeah, understood.
And then there's other times where you can sort of like, oh, there's a sort of, there's like, I'll think, oh, there's a joke. Maybe that's a little bit of NI, where, oh, there's a joke in here from these. It's like you've got the components, and it's like, oh, I can make a joke out of these components. And it's like there's a feeling that there's something there. There's comedic potential in combining these ideas.
Okay, yeah, I understand. So a good example of how an INTP type might use their NI to, you know, further things along.
Maybe.
Okay. Okay. So, quality. Okay. Contract. Pardon that.
I think B might lean towards NE.
Okay. How so?
Well, because like it's relations between ideas. And,
okay. Understood. See, I feel like, sorry, I don't mean to make this all about me today, but I've never been creative. And I don't know if you would define any, like one of the things you would define that as like creativity. I feel like I'm very good at taking something and making it better, but making something out of nothing, I've never been good at it.
Well, that's a tricky one with creativity in NE, because ISFP, which is the type which is any Achilles heel, any averse, is actually very creative.
So where does it stem from?
But there is definitely in any kind of creativity, but part of me is like judging people. Part of me is judging people, and it's like, you're supposed to be in any dom. You've not made me laugh yet. There is a lot of that. It's like, okay, I can give an example of where I think it can work. It really helps when you read something by an intellectual, concrete type. I won't say instinctive type or sentient, by a concrete type. When they're really intellectual, it really helps to understand their thought process. So somebody like Pat Patterson, I think he resembles ISFP, and he's like got a PhD in philosophy and poetry, and I've read his books on songwriting, and he was always banging on about the idea of prosody, where he thinks that. So, for example, an idea of prosody would be that, and he would talk about stability and instability, and it's like, if you've got an unstable part of an unstable part of a song, say it's like where it's getting emotionally unstable, and he says that if the meaning is unstable, then the rhyme type should be unstable, the line length should be irregular. So it's like everything is tightly integrated, and so we've got this. There's a word in NLP that sort of fits this. The word beginning with C.
Continuity.
A little bit.
Consistency. It's interesting because a friend of mine who makes beats, he told me that a lot of songs that become very popular, if it's like a sad song with sad lyrics, someone died, or your lover left you, mix it with a happy beat, and it seems so counterintuitive, but people seem to love that.
I found the word congruent. So all these ideas are congruent with each other, but and then he gave an example of a song that he doesn't like, where it's like. And it was like, it sounded like an NFP song. It's like, it's sort of like in one country they were talking about a bit of injustice, and then it'll go to another country with another example of injustice. And it's like idea to idea to idea. And it's like, to him, he hates that. And I'm thinking, any polar. And it's like, because he wants, it's almost like one idea from lots of different angles, and everything is tightly integrated. But you see, the thing is, that's good art, where it's integrated and everything is. I've forgotten that word again. What's that word? Congruent. Yes, that's it. Congruent. Everything is congruent. Everything is integrated. Whereas with NE, it's like, oh, it's over here, it's over there, and there's not as much unity with it. So that might be the thing where, and of course, so someone like Paul McCartney, I mean, he has said that he has dreamt songs, he has dreamt lyrics, and he's like awoken. So that could be an example of his NI. So maybe it might be with certain ISFPs, they've just developed really strong NI. I mean, it's not like every ISFP is Bob Dylan, but I see a lot of, I think Noel Gallagher's ISFP. I think his artisan, he says he has about 6 friends. That's it. Like there's about 6 contacts on his phone. And his brother Liam Gallagher, ESTP, they don't get on well. But yeah, so a lot of ISFPs, when they're talented, the people will type them as an intuitive.
Okay.
Just type bias. There.
Interesting.
Whereas I think there's a creative subfunction of every function.
Okay. See, talking to you just makes me just further embeds in my mind just how elaborate some things can be. And this is just, you commented on it, the video that someone, what's his face, made about me being an INTJ, and then oh man, people in the comments saying ish like, oh, she's an SE Dom because she has a high squeaky reality star kind of voice. I mean, no kidding. I get pissed off when people who like read one article on Google, you know, try to tell you all about yourself. It just, but on the flip side, I feel so blessed like to know people like you. But when you start talking to me about all this stuff, it's just, it's like everything else. It's like, you know, what I know about regarding hypertrophy and, you know, biology, it's just, it's so intricate. And the minute you start thinking, I understand this, something else comes along like, hey, hold on, you're an idiot. Like, here's all this stuff you don't know. So yeah, it's just, you really bring me back down.
there's a point there about, and because you know that, so I heard a Linda Bones interview recently on Megan Lavota's channel, and she was talking about, because my thinking, the person whose my thinking is closest to is Linda Bones's, where she she sort of integrates functions into temperament. So she like got there before me, like 20 or 30 years ago. And she would talk about a complex system and a human system. So you know from the cell, and she was saying that don't look at the process in isolation. And you can say that when you're thinking about the cell, you can't. It's a complex system. Right. And that's the kind of thing with these functions. Like when I was saying with, well, Ben, what's NA like? And it's like, well, it depends if it's working with it.
Yeah.
And so that's why if you then look at certain roles, certain predisposed Kersey roles, and then we can sort of say, okay, when someone is engaging in this activity, which functions does that role draw on?
Right.
So I think if someone's counseling someone, I think it draws on NI, FI, and FE.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
When the INTJ is arranging something, I think it draws on NI, TI, and TE.
Yeah.
I think INTP is when they're creating a model. It's drawing on TI, NI, and NE. And you usually sort of stick in those sort of big three. Or when an ESTJ is supervising, TE, SE, and SI. And they tend to use the assertive kind of SE to enforce the rules.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Or ENTP.
Okay.
When they're inventing. I sort of changed their I mean, they're the troll. But what you can say about most ENTPs are not inventors, but most ENTPs are good debaters.
Okay.
I would say the average ENTP and up is a good debater. I don't know what percentage of ENTPs are inventors, but the actual role of inventing, which functions does the role of inventing draw on? Well, you got to have the idea. You got to think. You got to use extroverting thinking, because you're thinking about, okay, how am I going to make this? How am I going to put this together? What are the parts available? All of these kind of things. Are people going to be interested in it? Do people want this? So, so there's a strong TE part there, and now when Kersey talks about the two halves of the strategic intellect of strategic building, now we talked about coordinating before. And I would say that if you're coordinating resources towards a long-term objective, that role draws on NI and TE. Intuitive development and practical thinking, empirical thinking. And Kersey would say that the NTPs are predisposed towards constructing prototypes and theories. And we can look at that role of the inventor, of the constructor, and we can say, okay, which functions does that draw on? Which functions are useful for, say, constructing a theory? And it's like, well, TI and NE. So INTP has a predisposition towards coming up with ideas and constructing a theory. And the construction of theory draws on those function. So it's like which way you want to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and so there is a tendency in me to sort of look at it from the point of view of the socially intelligent role and what functions it draws on, because I can say, well, you might not believe in functions, folks, but that thing exists, constructing exists, coordinating exists, providing exists, monitoring exists, mentoring exists, mediating exists, expediting exists, entertaining exists. All of those Kersey intellects exist, and they correlate to function pairs or function triads, because I like to put the fish's water in there.
Okay.
Like I said, with the INTP, you put the T in there.
Gosh, yeah.
Right. So have you gone through most of these?
Yeah, I wanted to read the bit at the bottom.
Okay.
Okay.
Now you might like this next one. Just this point about how it takes the form in memory. You might have loads to say on this.
Okay. Should I start at the second paragraph or read the whole thing?
Oh, the whole thing, please.
Okay. Okay. How so? Exert persuasive influence on others.
Well, I think that's mainly thinking about NFs.
Okay. Okay. You know, I don't know if this has anything to do with it. And I've gotten better as I've gotten older. I think I've told this before, but I'm very bad at seeing like everything around me. So much so that I can't even tell you that some experiences I had when I was younger, I can't tell you if they actually happened. Like, for example, I might imagine a red carpet in the room when it might have been a greenish brown, like stuff like that. I really cannot tell you much about the physical. And so what I remember in that regard, largely due to like physical attributes, I can't tell you. And it's interesting because I have to think back, like my memories of certain happenings with people and what was said and what was done, I'm pretty accurate. But with physical things, I can't tell you. And so I know that a large part of my memory of the physical things is not accurate at all.
Right. I think that gets towards low SI in the knit. I don't know if you like being described as a knit. The contender rational, the NITX resembler. So if we say compare to your sister, SITX. So one of the questions I ask a lot is about SI, and I think it gets towards imaginative SI. I really shouldn't have said that. I should have said that afterwards. So forget that I've said that. So when you said you did a lot of reading, what was it like when you were reading descriptions of objects?
It's like I would just imagine, like I was there, like I was watching it in my mind, like I was watching a movie in my mind. And often when something sudden in the real world, you know, the bell rang in school, I was reading in school, or my mom came in the room, the door opened and boom, it's like all of a sudden I was taken out of this imaginary world that I really enjoyed so much. I mean, when I was younger, I read all sorts of adventure stuff. And of course, I didn't want to do it in the real world. Like I didn't want to actually go do it. I wanted to do it in my mind. And so when I would read all this description, it would just play. But I will say that I didn't really remember a lot of it, the physical detail. And I think this is why I could go to the same book over and over and read it again and again and again. And maybe I would, like, it would actualize in different ways each time, but I couldn't tell you, like, after I read a book the first time, you know, it was so vivid in my mind, like what was going on, but I couldn't tell you, like,
right.
if the carpet was green or brown or orange. Like, I didn't know. I didn't really care, but.
And this is what I mean, is like with certain of these functions, these introverted ones, you really got to ask questions like this, else you would not know. So usually what happens is the SI DOMs and the Guardians really like sensory description. and the sensory description is evocative for them, but it appears to be evocative for you. But a lot of the times, people with an intuiting preference, they find, say, description in a novel of, say, clothing or the furniture, they find that boring. Whereas to you, you're saying that that's evocative.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it, but apparently not enough so to remember it.
Right. So
like, I liked it in the moment, but I didn't care enough to actually remember it.
So I would say that with certain people, you can get an atypical accentuation. So in myself, I think I have atypical accentuated FI, even though in the model of INTP, FI is like 7th and SE is 8th. But there's certain features of FI that I think I can do. And I think you can do imaginative SI, the imaginative subfunction of SI. And there's going to be other kinds of SI. What?
I just have to say something regarding that. The thing I would remember, and I don't know if this is just because I'm a fatty, but I always remembered the detail of food being described. Anything else I didn't care, but food, I loved it. And I can't tell you why.
I've got a question for you. So when a smell is described, can you imagine smells easily?
I don't think so. I don't think I can.
Because usually guardians, it's like instant for them.
I'm trying to like think of spaghetti, like something that's really strong that I'm cooking.
I can imagine taste. Can you imagine taste?
Oh, I'm having trouble. I can with very strong things like vinegar. I feel like, but it's not even the taste. It's like it's like more of it being acidic.
Oh, I could do. For me, smell is hard, but taste is easy.
No, they're both
like
kind of hard.
bacon sandwich. All the pleasure, no calories. Put some tomato sauce on there. Maybe a bit of barbecue sauce. Very nice. Anyway, I'll get back to this event. So that I can do that, but what is hard for me is like sound is quite hard as well. Just like imagining a certain person's voice. I have to like really concentrate to do that.
That's difficult also.
No, interestingly, I once asked my mother. Again, these are the kind of things that guardians can do. Like, but again, you have to test them with SI. It's like some of them I think can do this. Ask them to imagine one of their favorite singers singing a song they've not heard before. Like, how would they cover it? And they can do that. I think a lot of them can do that. So this kind of like powerful sensory imagination that guardians can have, but they usually don't express it because it goes against their temperament. Because for the temperament, arts are not a reliable career. So you might get them as a hobbyist. Like a lot of ISFJs like poetry, amateur poetry.
Interesting.
So you might have accentuated SI, but again, that might be the thing of because you're such a strong, you have such a strong introverting preference that you're going to be better at introverting sensing than extroverting sensing, just because you're in that state so often, that introverting state.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any more of this? You got some more of this too?
Okay. The image becomes a symbol. Word symbols have been okay. Okay. So it's talking about like how something just brings about this NI state, like something can trigger it. Like you see something and then you go back to a memory where you experience this, like.
Yeah, I'll process it as well.
the person who gave us the intuition, or the place where it occurred. It may, however, bear some relation to the whole and reflect certain of its features. The totality is fixed in the memory of this form in a certain image, which serves. Yeah, I think so. In recalling an instinctive experience, memory may proceed from emphasis to emphasis in this sensation in this way reproduce the actual experience. This is not possible with intuition. Yeah, I think maybe it's talking about how with me going back to a book, for example, maybe even sometimes, and this is totally possible, when I'm reading it, it might give some detail, very specific detail, but I'm not I'm imagining it around the detail. Like, again, if it says the red vase with intricate gold, whatever, I'm imagining some kind of different red vase. Like, it doesn't have to be, so maybe that's what it's talking about. Like, like your memory is sparked by something, but not exactly. Like, your intuition kind of takes over and it turns it into something different.
Yeah, there's a lot of subjective sensor in there, subjective instinct in. I'd like to show you something. Can I show you something about instinct? Because I've got a bee in my bonnet about instinct and I think you might find it interesting.
You have a bee in your bonnet, sir.
I have a bee in my bonnet about this. I've really gone whenever Vanderhoop, because he like Copernican revolution, the sun doesn't go around the earth goes around the sun. And that's the difference in the change between sensing and instinct. And I've got to find my cards. I think I added you to the group on Facebook, the Vanderhoop group.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, so hang on a moment. Cards. Index card notes. Right, instinct. This is completely different way of looking at sensor, but it matches temperament. It's consistent with temperament to such an extent that you could talk about an artisan instinct and a guardian instinct.
Okay.
There we go. If you read that out, I can get your commentary on it.
Okay, because I had begun to regard emotion as an expression of instinct, I was no longer able to accept Jung's formulation of the function of perception. Emotional reactions are immediately bound up with sensations. Okay, so this is what you were discussing earlier. So-called feeling tone, together with reactions of liking and disliking, thus form with sensations a psychological entity. Oh, okay. In studying their mode of adaptation, I saw, in fact, more and more clearly that they were not guided exclusively by their sensations, but by their sensations coupled with their emotional reactions thereto, and further by their instinctual needs as well. Instinctual needs as well. So, like you said, when they say, "Oh, I broke it because I felt like it,"
yeah,
we can classify
an impulse for the guardian, for the artisan. It's like they just feel like doing it. They were bored. They have an impulse to act.
Yeah, but can we define that as a need?
For the artisan, it is. They need to
broke it.
For them, it is.
Okay.
It's like because they got to. If you see what an artisan, an SE Dom, 14-year-old boy, it's like they're just gonna do stuff because they felt and even sitting still for them is. If they have an urge, they trust their impulses. Now, when it's highly developed, and if they're really concentrated on the situation, then any impulses they have will be appropriate to the situation, and they then can react quicker than someone can think because it's an instinctive reaction. This is why they can be so good as surgeons and pilots and warriors.
Interesting. Very interesting. Okay, adaptation is here governed by emphases in regards to emotion and attention in the field of sensation, and that action.
You missed out a key line. It took me ages to write that line to fit it all on one line, and I used friction pens and I rubbed it out, and I must have done it 8 times in order to fit it all in. So if you read that, it's
I'm blind sometimes. You're going to have to, call it to everybody's attention. It seemed, therefore, incorrect to me to regard sensation as the only characteristic factor in the function. Okay. In this function. Okay. Okay. I'm going to pick up that action is also directed by details of a concrete kind. Care to elaborate?
Well, so this is like you know how like you look at like biological things and it's like oh Ben, I don't want to look at this in isolation. It's part of this complex system, and he's looked at that at sensor and he thought, hang on a minute, so he's looked at like the SE DOM. Now we know from the point of view of if we're looking at an SE DOM, we go, okay, they're an artisan. They trust their impulses. They seek excitement. And so got all of these things that are part of what the artisan wants. They're essential motivator patterns, as Linda Bones would call it. And it's like, so, and they have this action, a certain kind of action that they want to take. And so the artisan instinct is towards trusting their impulses, and it's like they value excitement, they seek sensation, and that's not just so with all of the functions that are not these instincting functions. So for example, if you know what introverting is and extroverting is, then you can intersect that with the idea of thinking, and you can get to a definition of TE and TI. You can just get to that definition. You can say TE is empirical and it's external and it's consensus and it's like empirical thinking, and you can talk about TI as subjective thinking. And you can do the same with FE and FI, and you can do the same with NE and NI. But when you get to sensor, it's like if you
saying it's not as
it's not just empirical sensing. It's not just the SE DOM is far more than just somebody who has got sensory acuity. They want the SE DOM wants to, again, they value being excited, they're seeking sensation. That's not in a definition of SE that you can get at just by intersecting extroverting with sensing. And so it's like Vanderhoop there. In studying their mode of adaptation, so he would sometimes refer to as a function as a mode of adaptation. So if we think about artisans, if we think about ESTP and ESFP, then what he says there seems true. In studying their mode of adaptation, I saw in fact more and more clearly that they were not guided exclusively by their sensations, but by their sensations coupled with their emotional reactions thereto, and further by their instinctual needs as well. There's an artisan instinct, like there's a competitive instinct. There's all of these things that you get with the artisan. Where
now, you feel this needs to be stated because, like, for example, NI or SI, it's more of a broader definition where they take these things into account. But generally with SE, it's like it was such a, very kind of abrupt definition, like they're enacting.
Yeah, and in this example, you can just see it, and so because I knew Kersey before, I mean, I only came across this last year, and because I know Kersey, it's like this is like Kersey, it's like he has described instinct as like the essence of art. But here's the irony, though: Dario Nardi and Linda Behrens already describe extroverted sensing like this. They just haven't changed the name. I want them to change it to instincting, but they already have it. So for example, I can prove this. So I'll just put on screen Dario's definition of all of the things in SE.
Okay.
And I can show you that's instinct, that's instinct, that's it. And I highlighted all of the bits. So I just got to find this. So now I've got to go in the Dario folder. Right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Right. So the 8 keys folder.
To me, it seems so just apparent. Like it goes without saying that they're gravitating towards some object because of their, something they feel inside of them that prompts them to. I mean, it just seems so intuitive, like you. But I agree, it's not fair to define these other functions, or whatever you would call them, so broadly, and have they incorporate all these other factors, whereas SE, it's just kind of like one sentence done. It's like, no, there's always more than that.
It shortcuts it. If you do the honors. So what I'm saying here is Dario already has it. Freely follow your gut instincts and exciting physical input. So all I'm saying is, Dario, you're already defining it as instinct. Change the word. Don't call it sensing anymore. Call it instincting, because that's what you're describing. Thrill of action. Thrill of action is not in. If you have like I said, you've got the idea. We know what sensing means, and we know what extroverting means. And if we put those two together, thrill of action is not part of that, but thrill of action is the emotion that Vanderhoop mentioned that's bound up with the sensing. And he mentioned action, didn't he, Vanderhoop? So again, I'll let you absorb that, take all that in for SE.
What does this mean? Instantly read visible cues to see just how far you can go?
That's part of the instinct. They want to see how far they can push it, the artisans. That's the instinct, to see how far they can go.
Great. Okay.
Think of the ESTP school pupil who's pushing the teacher.
Yeah, right. That's pretty much the stereotypical image in my mind. See, okay. Become totally absorbed as you move, touch, and see what's around you. This is something So
the reason why Dario's defined it like this is, this is all of the stuff from the artisan temperament. So it's like what Vanderhoop's done. Vanderhoop didn't know about temperament because he was before Kersey. But Kersey was 16 years old when he wrote Conscious Orientation. Kersey wasn't on the radar yet, but they're describing the same thing. I just agree with Vanderhoop. It's like, this is instinct. We're no longer talking about sensing in isolation.
So I'm sure, as you can give your experiences, you can't speak for all INTP, of course, but you love doing the bottom three, don't you, Mr. INTP?
Well, I love getting 1 out of 16 for SE, and I'm not ashamed of it. That's the only one I've ticked, that top one.
Okay. So you feel like you ticked it because you enjoy it, or just because you're decently good at it, or both?
Just because I notice it. I mean, it's like, but I did follow Dario's advice of, you tick a box when you genuinely do it. But over here, I've done a half a tick. And for some of them,
I mean, why? It's because you kind of don't enjoy it, but you do it. I mean, why?
Here's the difference between the two of us. Do you think this is hot? Would you like to be better at this kind of stuff?
I'm good at imagining it and enjoy. I enjoy imagining it, but when it comes to doing it, it is never as fun as what I imagined it to be. If that makes sense. Yeah. I don't hate it, but I don't jump at the chance to go do things. So
do you agree that those bits in yellow are related to instinct?
Instinct being defined as?
Seek. A sort of a complex of sensation, emotional reactions there too, a kind of inclination towards certain actions, and then a certain kind of special knowledge. So Vanderhoop talked about that you can sort of know your way around a city without being able to articulate it, or if you hear certain sportsmen doing certain things where it's like they know what actions to take, and that's where we would go about emphases in the field of sensations. and it's like it's hard to articulate, hard to talk about, but it's like, and I said that certain kinesthetic know-how, sort of like bodily control, that's part of it. So, but like I said, gut instincts, excitement, and impulses would not be in a definition of extroverting sensen if you were just if you were just intersecting empirical and the five senses. And we know there's slightly more than five senses, like balance and like where your body is in a, like, you know, what did they call it, proprioceptive or something? It's quite a hard word to pronounce for me. There's certain minor senses beyond the big five.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, but the reason why this is in here is this is I call this is the cologne. This is essence of artisan. All of these things are from the temperament. But so it's like they've ended up in the. So my point is that Dario and Linda Behrens have put the temperament into their definition of SE and SI. So this is more than sensen. Enjoy the thrill of action.
Yeah.
That's spur action and get results simply by making your presence felt. That's part of the competitive instinct of artisans, especially ESTP. Now this, you could say, now this bit, that bit there, become totally absorbed as you move, touch, and sit. That bit would be what you would get if you intersected empirical and the five senses. You would get that. Become totally absorbed, move, touch, and see what's around you. And that's all you would get, I think. Oh, and that maybe that first one you would get there as well. Gut instincts you wouldn't get. That bit there, to see how far you can go, that's a motive. So that's outside of it. Take advantage of immediate options for action.
Right.
Again, it's part of the instinct. You want to take action. Easily get in sync physically with things. Maybe that you could get that if you intersected the ideas of empirical and the five senses. Enjoy the thrill of action. Enjoy emotion, impulse, emotional reaction, spur action. And then again, the instinct for introverting the sensation or introverting instinct. And I would also argue that there's three sub-functions as well. And again here, follow the work, ideas, and examples of others who have come before you. Why would you do that just by... So, for instance, I agree that... I talked about SI as subjective sensing. I think that is part of it. But you don't get this stuff in yellow from that idea by just saying subjective sensing.
Okay. Honestly, I read that and all I can think is crazy temperament SJ.
Yeah, because that's what Linda Behrens, because that's exactly what they've done. They've put the temperament into the function. Because they're about wholes. Both of us are about wholes. Like, again, from the science point of view, you don't just look at one process. You look at the whole cell, and then the body, and then that person in their environment and their diet, and it's all of these complex things going on at the same time. And it's like Van der Hoop said, sensation is not the only characteristic factor in this function. And that is, so all I'm saying though is that with all of these extra stuff in there, this is more than sensing. So you're gonna have to throw sensing out. You want to be accurate. And the best I can come up with is instincting.
Well, I don't think you're off track. I totally understand where you're coming from.
Thank you.
But we are going to have to pick this up next time because we're on an hour and a half.
Okay. But can I give you a little preview of next time?
Yeah.
I did subfunctions. Subfunctions would be under VIT. That's basal and integrated typology. Functions. Single functions, no, versing functions, and instincting. So this is something I came up with, but I used the idea of DC and H, But originally I had a normalizing subfunction, and then I realized it's just the core. So if you put that on screen, and this might be the first time you've come across. Now, would you like me to zoom in on one particular one, or?
Hold on, I'm taking a look. Gosh, see, this is stuff I really don't know.
This is new. This is from me. So like,
I don't know
excuse.
this at all.
So again, core level, empirical instincting, stimulation, attention, immersing in the present context, situational awareness, calmness under pressure. This is what we observe from SE DOMs.
Okay. Yeah.
And then we've got here. And I think now I used to put normalizing in, and then I realized, so I used to put there like situational awareness, and I put it under normalizing because I took the idea from the subtypes, like Victor's subtypes.
Okay.
He had dominant, creative, normalizing, and harmonizing. I didn't want to put dominant because it might get confused with like dominant function. So I changed that to assertive. And then another thing I did was for extroverts, it's creative, and for introverts, it's imaginative.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea. It's a little confusing, but I understand why you do it, changing the names like that. But to be fair, like all this, like when I see these words, I don't, like I can assume, but some of these words, I just read it and it's confusing and I don't know, and I have to ask you. But
so,
why don't we pick this up next time?
Okay, hard limit, folks. I'm on the hard limit.
Well, again, next time I would love to pick it up here, but it's going to be like, I'm probably going to interject some stuff, like just, asking really Ben. So yeah, it was great. Thanks for all your insight. And really, I feel rusty and you're helping me get back up to speed on some of this. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, we plan to do this about once a month, so hopefully that's going to work for everybody's schedule and it's not going to be too much for anyone. So yeah, how is May the 10th?
Well, we're still live. Just to let you know, we're still live at the moment. So May the 10th.
Yeah, it's fine.
Is May the 10th is Monday.
Okay, well, we'll look for the weekend around that time.
How about May 9th?
Yeah. Is that Sunday?
Yep.
Okay, let's see if we can do it.
Right, there we go. So, HH video. There we go.
All right, well, thank you very much for having me, Mr. Ben, and until next time.
You're welcome.